For 20 years, she had walked these hallways in silence, a mop in hand and dust at her feet, unnoticed by the students and professors who passed by. Each step echoed a lifetime of unrecognized talent, of degrees earned but hidden, of dreams deferred. She had learned to exist in the background, to make herself small so the world wouldn't see her brilliance. But that day was different. A visitor arrived, carrying the air of prestige, a Harvard recruiter whose gaze lingered longer than it should have. And when he spoke, calling her professor, it shattered decades of invisibility. Suddenly, all the years of quiet labor, the late nights studying in secret, the unnoticed achievements came rushing back. She paused, heart pounding, as the realization settled in. She had been seen, truly seen. For the first time in her life, she followed him down the corridor, every step a mixture of disbelief and fear. The world she had known, the quiet, hidden life of floors and dust, felt distant now, like someone else's story. Questions she had buried for decades rose up. Could she belong here? Would they see the same brilliance she had always known in herself? The recruiter spoke softly, describing opportunities and places she had only imagined in textbooks, tucked away in drawers. For the first time, she allowed herself to dream out loud, to imagine a life where her intellect and labor were equally valued. Every word seemed to lift a weight from her shoulders, replacing years of quiet erasure with a fragile, radiant hope. He asked about her background, and she found herself speaking not as the janitor the world saw, but as the scholar she had always been. Degrees earned in secret, papers written at midnight, and nights spent studying while others slept. She recounted it all without hesitation. He listened with genuine attention, nodding at each revelation, his respect deepening with every word. For the first time, someone acknowledged the full measure of her life's work, not just the labor everyone took for granted. And as she spoke, she realized that the walls she had built around herself were no longer necessary. She could step into her truth without fear. Word of her encounter spread quietly through the hallways, and whispers began to follow her steps. For years, she had been invisible, a figure erased by routine and expectation. Now, eyes lingered just a little longer. Nods of recognition accompanied her once unnoticed presence. She moved through the campus differently, her posture a little taller, her heart beating a rhythm of possibility. Each day, the world asked her to prove herself anew. But she felt ready. After decades of waiting, the moment had come when her labor, her intellect, and her patience were finally converging into recognition she had earned but never expected. She stood outside the lecture hall for the first time, her hands trembling slightly as she held the door. Inside, students waited, unaware that she had once been the silent presence behind the cleanliness of their classrooms. The recruiter's words echoed in her mind. Professor. The title felt foreign, yet entirely rightful. With a deep breath, she stepped forward, carrying decades of unacknowledged brilliance into a room that would finally see her, not as a janitor, but as the scholar she had always been. And in that moment, the past and future collided, proof that recognition can arrive when you've endured the longest shadows. The first day in the classroom was both exhilarating and terrifying. She walked past the rows of eager faces, feeling the weight of expectation settle on her shoulders. Each student looked at her with curiosity, unaware of the decades of unnoticed work she had endured. Her heart raced, but so did her excitement. This was the life she had prepared for, even if the world had tried to erase her. Every step forward was a reclaiming of space she had been denied. Every word spoken a quiet triumph over years of invisibility. She began her lecture, voice steady but charged with passion. The words she had whispered to herself for decades now carried authority. She explained ideas with clarity and patience, moving with the confidence of someone who had spent years learning in silence. Students shifted in their seats, some surprised, some inspired, but all captivated by the presence of a woman who embodied knowledge and resilience. She realized that teaching was not just about sharing facts, it was about showing them that brilliance can exist in unexpected places. The students' questions came fast, and she answered with calm precision, weaving personal anecdotes and academic insight. Every response built credibility and shattered the preconceptions lingering in the room. She saw faces light up, eyes widening in recognition, not just of the material, but of the human experience behind it. For the first time, she felt fully present in a world that had often tried to ignore her existence, and the energy in the classroom mirrored the energy stirring inside her. After class, whispers followed her down the hallways. For years, she had been invisible. Now, admiration trailed her like a quiet halo. Some students approached, offering thanks or sharing their own stories of struggle. She listened with empathy, understanding the longing for recognition that mirrored her own. It struck her that teaching was not just an occupation. It was a form of justice, a way to ensure that others would not be overlooked, that brilliance, regardless of circumstance, would always be acknowledged. That evening, alone in her modest apartment, she reflected on the day. The transition from invisibility to recognition felt surreal. She thought of all the years spent mopping floors and studying in secret, and realized they had not been wasted. They had prepared her for this moment. She allowed herself to imagine the future she had long denied herself, knowing that each step forward was a testament to endurance, brilliance, and the quiet power of never giving up, no matter how long it took for the world to notice. As the days passed, the weight of her new role began to feel heavier. Students who once saw her as the janitor now hesitated in her presence, unsure how to engage with her. Some were eager to learn, while others were skeptical, unable to reconcile their expectations of a professor with the woman they had once ignored. She sensed the doubt in their eyes, the quiet judgment hidden behind polite smiles. But she had no choice but to push through, determined to prove herself, not just to them, but to herself. After class, a student lingered behind. His words were polite, but she could sense the underlying question. Are you really qualified? She had anticipated this moment, yet hearing it out loud still stung. The implication was clear. Despite her degrees, despite her experience, she was still an outsider. She smiled, offering a response that was both measured and firm. I've worked hard to be here. Perhaps it's time to see beyond the surface. The student left quietly, and she turned back to the chalkboard, feeling the weight of the classroom on her shoulders once again. The following weeks were filled with more quiet moments like that, moments where she had to confront her students' unspoken doubts and her own fears. But there were also moments of triumph. Some students began to speak up in class, asking questions that revealed their growing respect for her expertise. Slowly, she started to feel like she belonged, not just in the classroom, but in the world she had worked so hard to enter. She was no longer the janitor. She was the professor, and that reality began to sink in with each passing lecture. One evening, as she walked through the university quad, a colleague, one of the senior professors, stopped her. He was polite but distant, his eyes scanning her as though trying to determine if she truly belonged in the world of academia. You're doing well in there, he said, his tone not quite matching the compliment. But remember, you'll have to work twice as hard to prove yourself. She nodded, smiling faintly, but the words lingered in her mind like a shadow. The reality of being a Black woman in academia, even as a professor, meant that every success was still measured with skepticism. She had always known this, but now it felt even heavier. The day she received an email from the administration inviting her to participate in a faculty panel on diversity in education, she knew she had crossed a threshold. The invitation wasn't just a professional honor. It was a recognition that she had earned her place in the academic world. And yet, even as she prepared for the panel, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was still being tested. She had always been an outsider, and now, even in the very space she had fought to belong, she realized that the battle wasn't over. But for the first time, she was ready. The faculty panel on diversity was more than just an event. It was a turning point. As she stood before her colleagues speaking about the struggles of underrepresented voices in academia, she felt the weight of years of silence behind her. Every word she spoke was a bridge between her past and her future, between the woman who had cleaned floors and the one who now commanded a room. Her voice was steady and powerful, and when the discussion ended, there was a quiet shift in the room. She had made herself undeniable. Weeks later, she was invited to speak at a conference. The topic was leadership in education, and for the first time, she was asked to be more than a panelist. She was the keynote speaker. Standing before a room full of educators, students, and academics, she realized that her journey wasn't just about gaining a title or a position. It was about giving others permission to be seen, to be recognized for who they are, regardless of the obstacles they face. And in that moment, she understood that her real legacy wouldn't just be her accomplishments. It would be the doors she helped open for others. Her days were filled with lecturing, mentoring, and publishing her research. She had earned the right to take up space in these rooms, but more importantly, she had learned to make room for others. When she walked down the hallways now, students no longer whispered or looked past her. They greeted her with respect, some even seeking her advice. It wasn't just a new title she had claimed. It was a new identity, one forged from years of perseverance and quiet strength. And as she looked at the faces of her students, she realized that she had become the person she had always hoped would notice her. One afternoon, she sat in her office, surrounded by books, papers, and a few awards, symbols of her hard-earned recognition. She thought back to the janitorial closet, to the endless nights studying, to the years when no one saw her. But she wasn't bitter. She was proud. The journey had been long and difficult, but it had shaped her into someone who understood the importance of every step, no matter how small. Her place in this world was no longer defined by the expectations of others. It was defined by her own vision of who she was meant to be. On the last day of the semester, she stood at the front of her classroom one final time, watching as her students gathered their things. They had learned from her, but she had learned from them, too. They had shown her that teaching wasn't just about sharing knowledge. It was about creating a space where others could find their own voice. As the last student walked out of the room, she closed the door behind them, feeling a sense of fulfillment she had never known. In that quiet moment, she knew her journey wasn't over. It was just beginning. Months passed, and with each lecture, each meeting, and each conversation, she continued to find her place in the academic world. But it wasn't just the world around her that had changed. It was her. The woman who had once walked the halls unnoticed, her presence ignored, now carried herself with a quiet pride. She no longer had to fight for recognition. It had become part of her being, woven into the fabric of who she was. But she realized something. True recognition wasn't just about being seen. It was about seeing others. She was no longer just the professor. She was a mentor, a guide, and a symbol for those who felt invisible, just as she once had. One day, a young woman, one of her students, approached her after class, eyes wide with admiration. "Professor, I never thought someone like me could do this," she said, her voice full of awe. The words hit her in a way she hadn't expected. She realized then that her journey wasn't just about her own transformation. It was about giving others the courage to walk their own paths, regardless of the obstacles they faced. In that moment, she understood that her legacy would not be measured by the number of degrees she held or the awards on her shelf. It would be measured by the lives she touched, the doors she helped open, and the minds she inspired to believe in themselves. As the years went on, the woman's influence within the academic community grew. Her research was published widely, and she became a respected voice in discussions of diversity and equity in education. But her greatest achievement was not the recognition she received. It was the ripple effect she created. She watched as her former students went on to become leaders, thinkers, and change-makers in their own right, and she knew that she had played a small part in shaping the future. As she stood at the podium once more, this time at her retirement ceremony, she reflected on how far she had come. It had been a long journey, one filled with struggles, doubts, and victories. But in the end, she had made. In her final days on campus, she spent time in the quiet corners of the library, reading, writing, and reflecting. She thought about the younger version of herself, the one who had scrubbed floors, the one who had dreamed of a life in academia but never thought it possible. That woman had carried the weight of silence for so long, but now she was free. The past was no longer a burden. It was the foundation of everything she had achieved, and as she closed the final chapter on her career, she felt a deep sense of peace. She had not only earned her place in the world, but had changed the world for those who would follow. In the years that followed her retirement, her legacy lived on in the students she mentored, the research she contributed to, and the changes she helped bring about in academia. But most of all, it lived in the quiet moments when a former student would stop her on the street, a smile on their face, and say, "You changed my life." Those were the moments that mattered the most. She had never sought fame or accolades. She had only wanted to be seen, and to help others be seen too. As she sat on a bench near the university's campus, watching the next generation of students pass by, she knew that her journey had not been in vain. She had found her place, and in doing so, she had made a place for others. It had been 5 years since her retirement, and the university had just named a new scholarship in her honor. The announcement came as a surprise, not because she didn't deserve it, but because she had never expected this kind of recognition. She wasn't the type to chase accolades. She simply wanted to create space for others, especially those who had been overlooked. But now, this scholarship would ensure that students from underrepresented backgrounds, those who once felt invisible like she had, would have the opportunity to follow in her footsteps. It was a new chapter in her story, one where her legacy would continue to unfold long after she was gone. At a family gathering, her daughter, who had been a child when she started her journey, came to her with tears in her eyes. "I never knew you were so strong," she said. "I always thought you were just my mom, but now I see everything you sacrificed and fought for." The woman smiled, touched by the recognition. She hadn't done it for praise or acknowledgement, but hearing those words from her daughter made her realize that the real reward wasn't the scholarship or the recognition in her field. It was the way her story had shaped her family, her children, and their understanding, resilience, strength, and possibility. Her former students, now successful in their own careers, began to reach out to her, sending messages, visiting her at home, or inviting her to speak at their own events. They were no longer just the pupils she had taught. They were colleagues, collaborators, friends. In each of them, she saw pieces of herself, reflections of the person she had helped them become. And in these moments, she realized that the true power of mentorship lay not in telling others what to do, but in helping them see what they were capable of themselves. One morning, she found herself walking through the university campus once again. The buildings had changed. New faces filled the hallways, but the essence of the place, the energy of learning, growth, and discovery, was the same. She smiled, thinking about the students who walked these halls now, the ones who would go on to make their own marks on the world. She had become a part of the fabric of this place, not as a janitor, not just as a professor, but as someone who had shaped its future. Her legacy wasn't just in the scholarships or the awards. It was in every student who found a path, every student who believed they too could succeed. Years later, her name was remembered in the halls where she had once quietly swept floors. Her story was shared at orientation sessions for new students, how she had come from nothing, worked tirelessly to earn her place, and fought against the odds to become a professor. Her legacy lived in the stories of those who came after her, who saw her not as a symbol of struggle, but as a beacon of possibility. And when she passed away, quietly and peacefully, surrounded by loved ones, the university held a ceremony in her honor, with students, faculty, and former mentees gathering to remember not just the professor she had become, but the woman who had changed the world with her quiet strength. Years passed, but the scholarship and the stories of her resilience continued to inspire students, faculty, and communities alike. One of her former students, now a professor herself, decided to start a mentorship program specifically for those from underrepresented backgrounds. If it weren't for her, the new professor said, I wouldn't be standing here today. She taught me that we can be both the change we seek and the story we choose to write. Her legacy had become a blueprint, a model of perseverance, empathy, and the quiet revolution of self-recognition. The cycle of mentorship was now complete, and it began with her. In the years that followed, schools and universities across the country began to highlight her story in their diversity programs, using it as a beacon for students who felt unseen or out of place. Her story was no longer just her own. It had become a universal narrative of overcoming adversity, of stepping into a world that had been built without you, and demanding a seat at the table. She had transcended her own experience, becoming a symbol of empowerment for anyone who had ever been overlooked. The woman's legacy also made waves in the political sphere. Activists and politicians advocating for education reform began citing her as an example of what systemic change could look like. Her story was a living testament to the idea that transformation wasn't just about the policies we passed, but about the individuals who fought through the cracks to build a better world for everyone. She had never sought to be a symbol, but now she was a part of a larger movement, one that was reshaping the very institutions that had once overlooked her. Even in her later years, the woman's story was a part of university curricula, discussed in classrooms where future scholars learned about inclusion, perseverance, and the importance of breaking barriers. Her narrative was woven into the fabric of academic discourse, inspiring not just students but educators to rethink how they shaped the next generation. Every time a new educator spoke about making their classroom a more inclusive space, her influence was quietly present, a testament to the far-reaching power of one person's quiet revolution. On the anniversary of her passing, a memorial was held at the university. The ceremony wasn't just about remembering her. It was about celebrating the ongoing impact of her life. Her story had become a movement, one that transcended her individual experience and touched the lives of countless others. Former students, now teachers, administrators, and leaders in various fields, gathered to pay tribute to the woman who had opened the door for them. Her life had created a ripple effect, one that would continue to spread for generations to come.